All right, I think yeah, we are live.
Looks like
Hey
we're
everyone.
live.
Yeah, welcome to the stream. Today we're going to be discussing Unity, game development, some programming, some Unity dots, and of course we'll be taking your questions in the chat. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charles. I run a channel called Infallible Code where I do some Unity tutorials and game development tutorials as well. And we have Jonathan Thompson. You want to give yourself an intro there?
Yeah, definitely. So I run the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel. I'm doing all sorts of things with Unity development. Lately, been doing a whole lot of Unity dots and ECS stuff because that seems to be kind of the new hot thing on the block now.
Future, man. It's the future of Unity.
Yeah,
Some
definitely.
would say. Some would say it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah, there's some discussion there.
We'll definitely dive into that. But for those of you who are new to the stream, this is something that I've been trying to do. That actually we've been trying to do as a community, is get this community of game developers and Unity developers, sort of at like the level two in their journey. Towards becoming game developers and all that, learning programming, learning the more intermediate and advanced topics, trying to get them all together. And these streams are just one avenue where we are trying to organize. And I see a lot of people in the chat coming through. So hello. I see a lot of, on my side, a lot of familiar faces, Vakaral, some other folks there. So as we chat and talk about these things, we're going to definitely be engaging each of our chats. So feel free to
Yeah,
drop some
definitely.
questions.
Just got a message from Rasan saying how you doing? Doing pretty well, thanks. Glad to see you in here.
Hey, Rasan, nice, nice. Oh, by the way, I think a lot of you are coming in from Discord, but if not, each of us has a Discord server, so feel free to hit each of our respective descriptions and to hop into our Discord servers, and obviously we'll further the conversation after we're done here.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, if you're in the States, today's is that a United States holiday?
No,
Is it even a holiday? What is it?
it's a
Cinco de
it's a
Mayo.
Mexican
Huh?
holiday.
Oh, you know what? That's wow. That's hilarious. Showing my ignorance here. Cinco de Mayo. Oh, wow. That's yeah. 5th of May. I'm sure there's some. Do you know the history of Cinco de Mayo? I know we're going off
Not as
topic
much as I
early.
should probably.
Well, I don't know any of it. Clearly, I was saying it was an American holiday.
I want to say it's Mexican Independence Day, but I could be confusing that with something else.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, cheers to y'all who are celebrating that.
Yes, indeed.
Grab yourself a Corona. Not the virus. But,
Got it.
so let's dive in here. I see some more folks. I'm sure they're going to continue to trickle into the chat. Y'all get a chance to hit that like button on each of our videos. It really helps support. Tells YouTube that you
Helps
guys are
the
enjoying the
algorithm.
content. The algorithm, yes, the algorithm. I think so. Looking at your channel and looking at my channel, I think one common thread is Unity dots, Unity ECS, whatever they're calling it these days. What are your thoughts on that? You already said it seemed like the future. Well, what are your thoughts on Unity dots?
Yeah, I mean, it really just seems like it's kind of the new, cool, interesting thing, and it's something I hadn't heard of or really been familiar with until recently, and yeah, I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense just how kind of everything is organized neatly in memory, and you can just iterate through entities really nicely, and I think there's a lot of really good performance benefits that can come from it.
Yeah, definitely performance. One of the conversations I had in my last stream with Matt Mirfish was that in game development, Unity. I guess I can speak only to Unity because I haven't really used Unreal or any other engines, but there really isn't any like uh, approach that's like agreed upon that. Hey, if you're making a game, here's the kind of architectural pattern you're going to use. Like in web development, I mean, 9 times out of 10, you're going to use MVC. That's the approach, and you're going to use patterns like the repository pattern, and those are standard with MVC, or rather with web applications and web dev. But when it comes to game dev, it's like it's kind of the Wild West.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when first when it was first introduced as Unity ECS, I understood that entity component system pattern it's an architectural pattern, and that really kind of piqued my interest. I would say at first, that it would kind of be like, oh, it looks like we're standardizing on some approach to game development.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that might actually become the de facto standard, like MVC to to web development?
Well, I don't know. That's the interesting thing. I think as of right now, it's definitely just kind of like another, yeah, design pattern kind of in your arsenal. And it seems to make sense for a lot of reasons. And there are some places that it doesn't make sense to use it in. Um, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be kind of the standard going forward. I know that the whole like visual scripting system that Unity is going to be putting out, it's all based off of dots. So that'll be really interesting to learn more about.
Yeah, yeah. I just actually learned about that the other day. I'm sure everyone, the buzz now is all about how you can just purchase a Bolt or Ludic. Or I'm not sure what the deal, specifics of the deal is, but basically, Unity has acquired Bolt, and that's that visual scripting um, asset that's been available on the Unity Asset Store for so long. And but I think what I read was that Bolt was going to handle visual scripting for just like the mono behavior, the
Right.
component.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess Unity has their own in-house visual scripting that underneath the covers is all going to be like ECS.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I get from it too. So yeah, it is. I just got a code for Bolt today, so I'm going to be kind of diving into that, playing around with it, and kind of getting myself familiar with visual scripting because I think it is a pretty good tool. I haven't used much visual scripting lately. The only real visual scripting I did was back on Game Maker when I started kind of like learning game development. And I think it was just like a really good way to start learning the logic of how games work and how all these variables interact with each other. And yeah, getting myself familiar with that. So I do want to kind of dive into Bolt and play around with that so that when Unity does launch their visual scripting system for dots and ECS, that I can kind of you know know what I'm doing a little bit more.
Yeah, hopefully they'll have, they'll design it in a way that's kind of like visual scripting is kind of like sort of I guess the underlying architecture, it's agnostic of that, where whether whether it compiles, I guess you could say, to ECS code or compiles to your standard mono behavior stuff, that at the high level, when you're doing visual scripting, you do it for one, you do it for the other, that it's a shared language almost, and that it's easy to transfer that knowledge. So it'll be interesting to see. Have used bolts. I liked it. I thought it was cool. And what I like, what I think I think a Unity bolt, or rather Bolt visual scripting is to programming what Unity is to game development, where it's very easy to just download Unity. It's free. Follow a couple tutorials, and you've got something working. So it's like entry level. It's like, hey, it breaks down that barrier to entry of game
Yeah,
development.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think visual scripting is kind of the same for programming. It's, I almost find that folks will learn visual scripting, and and from what I know from Bolt and how that works, that node based flow, it is very logical. So you really could kind of take that knowledge, and it is kind of like an entry. Maybe like it'll rip down the barrier to folks who were always scared to program, and now it's like, well, if you learn visual scripting, you kind of understand the logic and the control flow of it all. At that point, you're going from dragging something around a node editor to just writing the code.
Right.
And so maybe we'll see a lot more programmers come out of this, actually.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely lowers the barrier to entry from going from zero to making actual gameplay relatively quickly. Because as you're talking about this, I kind of started thinking about going back to like when I started learning Unity, like going back to doing like the rollerball tutorial,
Yeah,
which I actually
classic.
recreated the rollerball tutorial using
Oh
dots on my
yeah, I
channel.
saw that. That's pretty
So
cool.
that was a pretty fun exercise for me. But yeah, I remember back when like I was originally learning Unity, kind of going through that rollerball tutorial. Like I probably went through it in like an evening, and then at the end of the day, I just kind of have like a little ball rolling around picking up cubes. So no, I
Yeah.
wonder with like what with visual scripting, like what's that going to look like if you spend an evening with it? What kind of gameplay are you going to be able to get out of it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen Bolt has held game jams, Bolt, where they have to use Bolt, and some really cool things come out of it. So, I think I hate to be cynical, and say, hey, look, at the end of the day, you're always going to need. It's like I think that you can get away with visual scripting for plenty of games, especially like well-defined genres and maybe even like platformers. And not to knock platformers, but it's kind of a very simple game mechanic. There's some physics involved. If it's a 2D platformer, it's pretty well defined how movement works and collecting things and keeping jumping on enemies. Those sorts of games, I think, that are really well established are going to be easier to translate visual scripting.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
do believe that there's just some games you're not going to be able to get away. You're going to have to code.
Yeah, it built completely on blueprints until it became, like the most popular game in the world, and then eventually they
Right.
had to be like, okay, we need to dive down and make some like optimizations so it doesn't crash when the whole
That must
world
have
is
been a
playing
pain
it.
internally, though.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, all their base code to transfer that.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking at my chat here. I don't want to neglect any questions or comments. I just saw coding with Unity. Hey man, what's up? Good to see you here. He mentioned Unity Tiny, which is I didn't realize there was Unity or ECS based, but
Yeah, yeah.
I never played around with that. Have you used Unity Tiny at all?
I've kind of like messed around with the demo a little bit,
Mm.
but it is really interesting because it's basically using like a dots runtime, so it's kind of doing some kind of live stuff. But I think that is to me one of the things that makes ECS and dots so appealing is, obviously it's cool to have like, a million entities on screen doing all kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think even more importantly than that, like we can kind of start bringing more complex games to lower powered devices, web
Yes.
browsers, mobile phones, Nintendo Switch, all that stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point because I think it's a I mean, I always hate to make general statements, but it's like I don't really hear that being talked about a lot. What I always hear is like, "Oh, you'll be able to do so much more computational stuff and simulate all this." And every example on Twitter is like a guy who's like shooting like bazillion bullets, and it's like,
You're like, okay,
okay,
that's cool, but yeah.
like I would probably never do that. Like even with the guy shooting a million bullets, it would just be like an animation or a particle, and I would just fake it in the code that he was shooting that many bullets. As far as damage goes.
Right.
But
Yeah. I think
but
there are some cool things you can do. Like they've mentioned that you can have kind of like real time space battles happening in the background.
oh
And
yeah,
rather than it just being like a video playing, like you can actually like interact with all these like ships flying around. And yeah, I
actually
think
have an
that'd be
effect
really
on the
cool.
world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that would be cool. I've always thought it'd be really cool to have a game that this is like I don't know, I think my ideas are so stupid sometimes. I always thought it'd be cool to have a game where like all the plant life actually grows.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
imagine, yeah, so like imagine like Breath of the Wild, but that world like the grass grows. What a stupid concept, right? Now I think about it, like who cares? The
No, I had someone
grass.
in my Discord talking about how they wanted to make use ECS to basically make like a whole ecology, and I think that's like
That's
perfect
cool.
use for it.
As like a simulation. I think that'd be pretty cool. And yeah, I
Yeah.
guess in a game too. Because like I always try to think of like there's a whole bunch of other industries that can take advantage of Unity. And obviously running simulations. Like I've seen simulations of like the COVID-19 spread done, I
Mm.
think with dots, Unity. And I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, 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 certainly.
Always wanted to do like another stupid idea that I have is like a city simulator, but where like every single person in that city is actually represented as an entity,
Yeah.
and they can see them physically move through that world, whether they're like inside of a skyscraper or they're walking around the street.
Yeah, no, it's cool because it takes away kind of some of that faking that you have to do to, maybe make it look like something's happening. But with this, you're actually making it happen.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. And the space simulator too. It's like you mentioned, like, oh, you could have a space battle going on in the background, and I think as a game developer, my first thought is like, I'll just fake that. I'll take a video
Yeah,
of it, stick it like on a plane, and you can, But it is kind of a cool concept to think of, like, wow, that could actually be real. And I think it'd be that's more relevant if like the game actually, had a reason to make it real. Like if there was an effect on the actual world, which would be kind of neat. Something like Star Citizen, you probably like fly into it. It's like, wow, this is actually millions of ships
yeah.
shooting each other. That's pretty cool. Checking my chat real quick.
Yeah,
Let's
let's see
see.
what we got on. See, Wild West Drift. Could you take one of those 1 million bullets to shoot to build something? Like once they hit to expand to make land, water, etc. Yeah, I think that's a perfect idea. I think like with dots, I think there's a whole lot of opportunities to do, procedural terrain generation.
Oh
Like
yeah,
imagine
yeah.
making some crazy world like, Minecraft on steroids with ECS.
Really
And,
tiny
it can be,
voxels.
yeah, completely all destructible and, like Wild West Drift was saying, have some kind of gun thing that actually generates this terrain, like in real time.
Yeah, yeah. And simulation. My mind always goes back to like simulating things like like that and creation and fluid simulations and yeah, it's definitely a lot of cool use cases, and I'm sure there's plenty of use cases that haven't even been thought up yet. And hopefully, as it matures, Unity Dots and Unity ECS, it'll be more accessible to those
Yeah.
like me who I've dabbled with it, but it's like I'm not really gonna try to learn. I'm not really gonna try to learn it in its entirety unless I really need it for something. Right now, I just haven't had a real for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's another thing that really stands out to me is just this is just really the beginning of, something brand new. And so
Mhm.
I think it's cool to be a part of, figuring out what are all the possibilities that you can do and, what are even some of the design patterns and best practices, that you can do that,
Yeah,
we've never even thought of yet.
I've seen like an ECS cookbook sprout up and on GitHub. I think Matt Mirfish has on his channel some videos like kind of like what's it called cookbook like videos. I think common things you'd see in ECS and common problems that you come across and how he them. So hey, what's up? The Joe Code, good to see you again, man. He says, I don't know, visual scripting takes the fun out of the process, at least for me. Kinda, me too.
Yeah, I
But some
mean,
people work visually.
the fun realizing that you left out a semicolon somewhere. Or
I would never.
yeah, I mean, I think visual scripting's fine. Like it's still really all the logic. It's just kind of taking away the syntax and getting something up and working. Um, I mean, again, I haven't really used Bolt. I've just kind of looked at some of the features it has, but it looks like that when you actually script something out visually, you can actually go into the code and kind of make some modifications through there.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of overhead in that. There's a lot of stuff going between your visual scripts nodes, and when you finally get down to the code, there's a lot in between of them.
Yeah, yeah,
It's cool. I think it has a pretty cool feature. Like visual scripting and Unity CS, and then just how we do it today with mono behaviors and components. Yeah, it's all a means to an end. And I think you said something earlier that I like to keep repeating is add it to your tool belt.
right.
All these things. I'll learn visual scripting because I think it's valuable probably for prototyping at the very
Oh,
least.
absolutely, yeah.
Rapid prototyping. And ECS, if I ever really had a need for a project and I needed that level of optimization performance, I would definitely. Now I know ECS, so I could use it. Have you used the job system outside of Dots, like as individual components? You know how you can kind of like turn up your own jobs.
Right, right. I haven't really used it much outside of just like kind of following tutorials and being like, oh, this is, cool that I can use. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely used it in ECS.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty neat that because with ECS, like that's the paradigm. If you get a project going and you're like, I'm going to use Unity ECS, like that's all you're going to use. So, you could obviously approach it with a high. I know they have the hybrid ECS. I'm not really sure what's going on with that if they're still
I
supporting the.
think they've kind of like evolved out of that whole like
I figured
hybrid
they
thing
would.
because yeah, when I started learning it, I came across like old blog posts from like a year ago, where they were talking about this whole hybrid ECS, and
Yeah,
I hadn't really heard much of that off the Unity documentation, so I was like, oh, what is this? But yeah, it doesn't really seem like there's like the full ECS and hybrid ECS anymore. It seems to be, yeah, like I think kind of like
pure.
bridging the gap now is using like authoring components. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They expose all that into like as if they were components in the editor.
Yeah, yeah. So it's super nice. Just on your data component, you literally just put an attribute that says like generate authoring component, and then that allows you to actually drag the data component onto a game object that has the convert to entity component as well.
Right.
And then that exposes all the values for the data component.
Yeah, yeah, that's neat. Um, and I think that'll be good. I think it's a good move for them to just to not do the hybrid thing because you cross those two paradigms. And to my point, as they move towards this more pure ECS approach, where like you have to lean into it. So your project is it's either going to use ECS or it's not. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to pick up that skill and honestly, like, again, just to have it in your tool belt, because you can't have both worlds. You know what I mean? Like you can't say, hey, I'm going to use a little bit of Unity ECS and for this part over here. But I'm also going to use the more standard mono behavior. No, it's like if you're using ECS, you're using ECS. However, if you use the job system, you can get multi-threading. You do kind of get
Right.
your cake and you get to eat it
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
nice. Which is nice.
Yeah.
Um,
No, so actually, this kind of leads me to so I did a game jam a couple weekends ago, the Ludum Dare
nice.
game jam.
Oh, right.
And yeah, and I see Philip in my chat says, "Have you worked on your full dots game since your last video of it?" No, I haven't really worked on it much since, but I did just record a kind of breakdown video today, where I'm going to be, kind of talking about how I made some of the main systems and stuff like that.
Nice.
But I still do use quite a bit of mono behaviors in there. I tried to use kind of the entity component system for, kind of like half of the game, getting some of my transforms and stuff to move around the game world and all that. But there's still quite a bit of mono behaviors to kind of keep track of everything. And obviously, like all the UI stuff is all mono behaviors.
That's cool. That's cool that you took that on, like, to because I like to see a full project, front to back, see what that looks like, full ECS.
Yeah, no, I think it was a good way to challenge myself to try and make a full game, especially over the course of a weekend, using as much ECS as I could, and so it was fun. I definitely learned a whole lot, um, and I feel like I was kind of at the point where I wasn't doing everything right the first time, but like
Mm,
I'd see an error and I'd be like, I'd understand why what I was doing was incorrect and I knew how to
right.
fix it. So I'm kind of like at that point where I can kind of, play around with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's again, I don't like to make big general statements, but I think that's the best way to learn anything really is like, or I guess with game development, it's like get from start to finish. Pick a project and a project with a logical endpoint. Obviously, you're not going to remake Skyrim, but like say, hey, I'm going to recreate a little platformer with one level, um, and get from start to finish, and that way you can see the whole thing. And you make the decisions you make when you first start a project are different from the decisions you have to make when you're in the middle of a project to the decisions you have to make when you're wrapping it up. And I think there's so much value in that, and
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
like you said, you go through it and you start to see things that you would never see by doing a lot of prototypes. I do, everyone does a lot of prototypes.
Oh yeah, of course, it's fun. You're like, oh, I got
It's
this
so
cool
fun.
new idea. Let's see how well that would work. And you're like, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yep, on to the next one. I love cracking open a fresh Unity project.
Yeah, no. But yeah, no, to that point, I think it is important to actually finish projects. Like, are you familiar with the boss fight books at all? It's a book series.
I don't think so.
It's a
My
book
Google search though.
series. Yeah, definitely check it out. It's a book series where they pretty much like break down. They're pretty much game design focused books. I
Mm.
think the only one I've actually read is the Spelunky one, and so that's actually by the creator of Spelunky, Derek Yu.
Oh, nice.
Most of the books are kind of like written by fans who are like super familiar with the series and all that. But anyways, in this book, he has a whole chapter like called "Finishing as a Skill," and so to just like really kind of hone in that skill of you actually finishing projects. because like that is, a whole extra level than just kind of, starting a
Oh yeah.
project and going through the, development and all that. But,
Yeah.
actually bringing a project to a full front to back completion and releasing and all that. It's really, really important.
It's hard, and it really does require a lot of different skill sets along the way.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't ever experience that if you don't get to the end of a project. And it is hard to get to that point because um, a lot of ideas that we have are grand, and really, it's I would say it's more valuable to focus on very simplistic games. Like I think I'm looking at the book list. This is pretty. There's a lot of big names,
Oh
a lot of
yeah,
big
yeah,
games. It's
definitely. They're
crazy.
like, yeah, some of the most popular games. You got all the Super Mario Brothers games and
Yeah.
Final
Red
Fantasies
Dead
and
Redemption's on there too.
yeah, yeah,
Crazy. I'll check these out. Like I see like Galaga, it's a pretty simple game. There isn't, I mean, there's definitely enough in there to where if you were to go ahead and spec it out and just try to use that as your prototype, so to speak, of what you're going to create, and you get from start to finish.
yeah.
I think there's really a lot of value.
No, that's what I recommend to like pretty much anyone who's starting game development. Is like, kind of once they've done some of the base tutorials and, figured out how to do basic things in the game engine, just, moving things around on the screen or whatever. I just say, just pick a simple arcade game and
Yeah.
make that front to back. Literally start with the main menu and have it go to a game over screen or a leaderboard or whatever, and just, build everything in that game front to back as close to the original as you can. And yeah, the reason that I think copying an arcade game is so useful is because you don't need to worry about any of the design decisions of how it feels to play and all that. You're literally just focusing on actually creating the game.
I think that's also, that's one of the reasons why I think game jams are important, because you're forced. You don't have the luxury. If you did have to design, you don't really have the luxury to change anything up.
Mm-hmm.
As you go, you have a deadline. You have to get there.
Yeah.
But also, when you go ahead and recreate like a classic arcade game, it does, because there's, like, again, there's multiple skill sets. There's multiple hats you have to wear. You have to wear the hat of the designer. You have to wear the hat of the usability guy who has to design the
Mm-hmm.
UI to make it. You have to design game mechanics, and but then you have to be the implementer. Then you got to be the tester, and you have to be the architect of the systems that you create. And it's crazy. Just removing the designer hat, which is a lot of hats,
Yeah.
by picking an arcade game and saying, "Hey, I'm not going to redesign this. I'm going to create it exactly as I see it and as
Right.
it
Yeah.
plays."
It kind of removes that subjectivity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then it allows you to focus on, okay, there's plenty of challenges in implementation,
Yeah.
to get wrapped up in the challenges of design. So yeah, it's definitely good. And then with game jams, although you do wear the hat of the designer, you really don't have the luxury to over design, I guess, or to let feature creep set in, and scope creep set in, and
Right.
because you have to finish, or else
Yeah.
you just don't finish. And
Yeah, no, that in game jams you always do have that realization of like, oh crap, this deadline is coming up. I actually do not have time to do this, 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 and this. What are the things that I can get away with getting rid of and still having a complete game that makes sense to play?
yeah, yeah, that realization, and then the realization that, like, it's okay. I don't have to. Every idea that floats into my head doesn't have to make it into the final product. It's
Right?
fine.
Yeah, yeah,
If you could just finish it and ship it, then you can just start on the next project
yeah.
and put your idea into that. But it's really hard.
Yeah, no,
It takes a lot of restraint.
even in this past game jam I did, there were a whole bunch of features that I just straight up did not have time for, and I've been doing. I think I've done probably about like 6 of these game jams, and yeah, still like it's impossible to scope out a project and actually get all that stuff in there at the end.
Yeah, yeah, it can be tough. Definitely tough stuff. Would you ever use a Unity CS in a game jam?
Well, I just did for this past one.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Nice.
So I think maybe at some more going forward as I start to get more familiar with it, just be able to implement more and more of that ECS stuff. Um, because even in this one, I kind of limited myself. I like purposefully didn't even import the ECS physics library into my project because I
Mm.
literally just wanted to be just focusing on, pure ECS, kind of just moving transforms around. And there were some places where it might have made sense to use some ECS physics, but I think that was kind of like another layer of variability that I didn't want to um, necessarily take on during that game jam.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you got to make all those decisions.
Yeah.
I recently did I where I work for my day job. It's not a game development company. It's like an enterprise software company. It's boring. You wouldn't want to hear about it. If I could tell you, but basically, uh, I convinced my boss, who's the owner of the company, to allow the dev team to create a VR app to help demonstrate what the product does.
Oh,
Because
cool.
yeah, yeah, it was really cool. And there's like a physical aspect to it. So like
Yeah.
we could show that off in VR. And where our code gets deployed, it's often like power plants and industrial settings. So it's very hard to show that off like on a conference room floor.
Yeah.
So like,
Okay.
oh, we'll just bring the VR headset and show them what it looks like. But what's cool about that is that like we had 5 days. Like he was like, you can take you can do a 1 week sprint, one
Okay.
work week sprint to do that. And I was like, okay. So I'm very much a planner, and I've written a million business specification documents and game design documents and things like that for both for fun and for work. And for this, I wrote a whole spec for it. And even before we did it, I created all the tickets too. 'Cause at my job, we have a ticketing system that all the developers work. We do Scrum and all that sort of thing. So we did a sprint, and it was really just a matter of like it was all designed ahead of time. So we were able to get through that sprint 5 days, and we actually came to the end of it with like a finished product. Obviously, you know, it was very limited
Enough
in
to get the point
scope.
across.
Yeah, very. I mean, we had very limited scope, and there were points during that sprint where we're like, should it also do this? Like, is this hard to use? And it's like, we don't have the time. But we did make some concessions. But the point being that like when you have this, I guess part of it is like having a deadline. It
Hmm.
keeps you honest. It's kind of like an implicit I forget the word I'm looking for is, but it's like it just keeps you honest to yourself. You're like, look, at the
Yeah.
end on Friday, if I'm not done with this, I'm not done with this, and
Right.
that's not going to be good for anyone. But when you work on a project on your own, like I know you have got projects, I have plenty of projects that I've been
Yeah.
working on. It's so easy to like let scope creep come in and just let it fall off to the wayside because it's like, I'll work on that later or whatever. Like
Right. Yeah.
it's overwhelming because I thought of another feature that I probably should have.
Yeah, you
And
keep adding things in and refining old things. Yeah, if it's a little more open-ended like that, then
refining old
it's
things. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, you could just try and, keep making it as perfect as you can for as long as you want, but if you're never going to actually finish it and release it, what's the point?
exactly, exactly. And that's a good point too. Like refining things that you've already written. That would be probably my biggest thing. Over scope creep because I'm pretty good at keeping things well scoped. But it's like, okay, I wrote this system and it works. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's even unit tested, but I probably could make the code a little easier to read. And then it's like, let me go back and see if I could rewrite this. And it's
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
it's such a waste of time. I see TNTC in my chat. Hey man, good to see you. Thanks for coming out. See a lot of other familiar faces. If I don't call you out, I apologize. But thank you all. Volker, I see you there. Thank you all for coming out. Checking the chat. So
Yeah, yeah. I see Davtam asking if I'm going to be covering some underdocumented dots features. Yeah, that's definitely
isn't
the
that all of
plan.
them?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely the plan. I mean, yeah, that's the thing about dots is there's not a whole lot of good documentation right now. So, for me figuring this out, I'm going through a bunch of different places, going to different videos and blog posts, and comparing that with the official documentation to, try and piece this all together. I think it's kind of under documented on purpose right now because, it's obviously still in the preview phases. And when it does get to a full release, I think they're going to be like, kind of behind this and says, this is what dots and ECS are going to look like going forward. And we can actually have some good concrete documentation that will, you know, last the test of time.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've written my fair share of documentation that weeks later was useless. I still have documentation on our company's wiki that you go to it. It's like, don't follow that. That doesn't work anymore. It's hard, man. It's tough. And, you know, I don't want to assume what's going on, internally at Unity, but I just feel like, in my experience, um, whether it be a mobile app, a video game, business application, I just see a pattern of not enough upfront work being done. And I'm not obviously talking about like sitting down as a hobby and just tinkering around with Unity, but like if a company or an individual, because let's face it, if you're an indie game developer and you have a vision, like Thomas Brush, for example, that is an individual who has created games. He's got a new one out coming out very soon.
Mm-hmm.
I view him as sort of like a businessman, like an entrepreneur
Yeah,
more than a
yeah, yeah,
game
yeah.
developer. Because he has to pool his resources, whether that be his time or capital, money, or his relationships. And then he's got to create a product, which he's done
Mm-hmm.
in a reasonable amount of time that makes sense for his life, in his business, and then put that out there, do all the marketing. And I think that, if that's where you're at, if you're like, hey, I'm going to be an indie game developer who puts something out, ships, then I really don't see a lot of like more upfront planning, because I feel like a lot of things, maybe I'm just being an idealist, but in my experience on working smaller features, the more upfront planning you can do and get away with, the easier the development process is, and the easier it is to sort of like tackle and push back on the features that become the feature creep, because you can say, hey, look, we thought about this very deeply up front, and
Mm-hmm.
this feature and I say, like, you're bringing up, maybe it's me, maybe it's myself, like, you're in the shower and you're like, ooh, it'd be really cool if if I could plant things, and it's like, but that doesn't make any sense in my game, like, why would I need to plant things? Sure, I
Yeah.
can make potions, but I could just loot the ingredients off of animals. Why would I add a whole different component to my game that doesn't really add that much value per se, and would be like so much extra effort to code?
Right.
And I find that the more upfront planning you do, the better established the idea is in your mind, and you can resist those sort of temptations or push back if it's coming from a third party.
So you're talking about kind of basically upfront planning, so you kind of have like all the check boxes of what you need to do. So kind of while you're actually going through development, you don't need to make those on the fly decisions as much. You're kind of just checking boxes and
Exactly.
along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether that's like because I wouldn't even, I don't want to be the kind of person that says, like, you have to write a game design document,
Right.
whatever form the upfront planning takes for you, you know, whatever it is, like, I think it's valuable, because I know a lot of folks get, and myself included, I would have been in this camp a while back, would get hung up on, like, you have to have a game design document, a GDD, you don't have that, and it has to have these subsections,
You're right.
and
Yeah.
a table of
Every game's
contents.
different. Yeah.
Every game's different, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it could be, you spelled it out on a napkin or something.
Yeah, I think
um
for me, what works best for most of the projects I do, just doing a one-page game design document, just to basically like set the theme and just kind of like, so I can always reference it and be like, does this feature that I want to add contribute to my vision, or is it, unnecessary? So I think just kind of always having that one-page thing to reference
yeah,
is just, yeah, super
keeps
simple.
you
And
honest.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely. We're, in my day job, we're designing an API right now, or redesigning our API. And one of the approaches we've decided to take is to do design first, code later. And we're using a tool called Swagger to do that. But basically, the idea is, like, you could design the endpoints for the API ahead of time without ever writing a lick of code. And we're pretty far along with that. We've done some tests, and it's been really nice. And I would like to take that approach, personally, in my own, like, even making a tutorial. I like to, like, design it first, see, figure out what it's going to be
Hmm.
before I start, before I sit down at the computer. And I always find that upfront planning is so valuable.
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and yeah, definitely nice to have kind of things like little Trello boards along the way to just keep track of just the smaller little individual tasks. I think that's super helpful, is to just break down your big problem into as many little problems as you can possibly do, so you can finish some of those little subtasks in an hour or a day or whatever. And I think it actually helps you feel like you're making progress towards your end goal. And you do
Yeah.
see that list getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, and that's good too. Something like a Trello board where you can like, move it over and like just the act of like moving it to in progress or done. It's like, oh, that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Kind of like I don't know. I'm a list guy too, so like I have my own Kanban board that I use every day. Like I'll just first thing I do before I go to bed or when I wake up is just lay out my daily tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to pick the easiest ones first, like to just build momentum. And usually it's really nice. It helps kind of like get the day going.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, I use Notion. Have you heard of that tool at all?
Check it out. I use Kanban flow.
Okay. Yeah, Notion's awesome. Like you can have little Kanban boards in there, and yeah, you can. I use it to like take notes, and I basically
Nice.
do everything. I write all my video scripts in there. Have like a whole list of all my video ideas, and yeah, it's awesome. But
Oh yeah, those looks great.
yeah, no. So for me, I do kind of the similar thing. Just kind of plan out the day in a little Kanban board inside of Notion. But I like to tackle the most important tasks first, because I feel like at the beginning of the day, that's when I'm going to I'm not quite burnt out yet from the day. So like what is the most important things that I need to get done first? So I like to do that first. And, sometimes it's the easiest and sometimes it's not. Probably most of the time it's not.
The NTC says in my chat, it's like a brain reward. You reward your brain with like, I did this thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like a little tiny thing. It's like, oh, I did it. I did something.
We have to
Today for
we
me,
have
I
to
had to read.
trick our stupid little ape brain
Yes,
into
100%. Today, I had one of my passwords for one of my internal accounts get expire, so I had to call technical support and get that done. It's like, oh, that's a stupid thing to have to do. And so it's like, oh, let me just do it. So I was put on hold. I was reading through some documentation, got my password reset, logged in. It's like, okay, that was dumb, but I got it done, and now I don't have to think about it
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty good. I have a journal next to me where I keep a lot of like my to dos,
Hmm.
and it's just like I don't know, I just the way I operate. Which leads me on to my next sort of thought is all these things, all these ideas that I have, and how we even you operate where you use like a Trello board or something like that or Kanban board. Um, I always hear the argument that some people are like, yeah, I just don't work that way. That's just not how my brain works, and I struggle with that because I just don't like I don't relate obviously, and I don't know how everyone works. So
Hmm.
it's like, who am I to argue? But then it's like, but then I've heard so many anecdotes. I won't even say I've heard studies, but I've heard anecdotes where it's like, oh, the human mind works better with that motivation. And I just wondered, like, I never know how much to push and be like, no, just try it, just do it. That's why I
Yeah.
haven't really done any videos on like agile development or Scrum, which I really want to do because I love that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But then I feel like people are just gonna be like, bro, that's just you, that's just your
Yeah.
workflow.
I think there is something to that. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for everyone else watching right now.
Right.
But I think the important thing is to just learn about as many of these different things as you can, and actually implement them and say, this week or this month or even just this one day, whatever it's going to be, I'm going to stick to that plan no matter what. And, maybe at the end you found out, hey, this little part of that thing worked well for me, or this just didn't work at all. And I know to avoid, working in that manner.
Yeah, no, I think that's valuable. Just giving things a go. And one thing we talked about in my last stream was just like there's always value in learning something. We're talking about how like I play the drums. Matt was a DJ, and I wanted to be an artist when I first graduated from high school. So I poured a lot of hours into that, and then I switched to becoming an English major because for some reason I wanted to be an English teacher. I spent a lot of hours doing that. So it's like all
Mm-hmm.
this time that I was like I wasted, but there really is value in learning everything you can, really, truly, even if you're not interested in it. and that does apply to workflows too. How meta, right?
Crazy.
It's like my workflow.
Yeah, no, I think there is something to that. Like putting a lot of time into a skill that's something that takes a long time to build up.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it kind of helps you in so many areas of your life. Just realizing that you won't be amazing the next day.
Keeps you
It
humble.
takes a long time. And so yeah, for me, I trained jujitsu. Well, I
Oh,
did
very cool.
before quarantine.
Oh.
Um, so yeah, it's been like 2 months since I've been on the mats, which is kind of annoying.
Oh man.
Um, but I mean, yeah, starting that up, like I'm getting choked out and things like every single day. And, it makes you learn that, you know, learning takes a long time. And when you start to see that slow progression and you start to be the person tapping people out, then it makes you feel good, and it makes you realize that it applies to a lot of other areas in your life.
Yeah. It's good for the mind. Just
Yes.
learning in general, but I mean, definitely with jujitsu, the physicality of it. I mean, I run regularly, and I always say, well, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever said this, but healthy body, healthy mind. So
Agreed.
it's
Yeah.
they're definitely physical activity. This is like turning into like a very positive like self-help sort of.
And get everyone into the working habits. But yeah, no, I think running's great. I kind of started regularly running a few years ago, and
Nice.
even when I started, I always kind of considered myself a fairly fit person. But I got back after that first day of running, and I didn't even go that far, and I walked like half of it, and I was just dead tired. But then, a couple days, couple weeks go by, and you start going like, hey, I can actually, run for longer distances and at a much faster pace, and don't need to
Yeah.
stop and walk and all that.
It's a good learning experience for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
my first half
challenge
marathon,
yourself.
I had never even run I think it was like the longest I'd ever run before my first half was like 6 miles. And but I was following like a regimen, and it's like, hey, look, if you can run 6 miles, you can do 13. And I was like, that's like more
Yeah,
than
I think
double.
that's a pretty fair estimate. Yeah,
So I was like, okay. But then of course we did it. Me and my wife did it, and we've been doing half marathons. And I think the running theme, you know, the running thread is like learning things. It, one, it keeps you humble.
mm-hmm.
It's like you said, you like, I'm fairly fit, I could run, but it's like you realize there's so much involved in every little thing. It's like there's so much nuance, and just to be a part of that, to participate in that is I think super valuable. Because even
Yeah.
if you don't become like an expert runner, just like going out, or even if like jujitsu is probably a better example, because like running, everyone's running their life, but like jujitsu, but I'm sure there's so much nuance to it. Like just to do it for a couple weeks and maybe never do it again, but to at least say, "Hey, I did it. I experienced it,
Yeah, you
and
kind of
I
like have an
yeah,
understanding of what that world is.
right." And how that can apply across the board.
Right.
Definitely. One random skill that I've been that's not really random because it's part of game development, but one skill that I've been cultivating over the past couple years is modeling, again, Blender, 3D modeling.
Nice, nice.
Not
Yeah,
like on the
modeling's
runway.
awesome. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Hey, I mean,
Please don't. But what's funny about 3D modeling? This is so random. So recently, I've been trying to 3D model my apartment. I thought, well,
okay.
how cool would that be to like just do the whole like
Yeah,
how
no, I
hard
think
could it
I think
be?
that's a good exercise because you have like a
Right?
well-defined end goal, and like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have all the
exactly.
reference material within arm's reach.
Yeah, I can measure it out. Like I know if I've messed up on anything. I got my headset, my VR headset, so I can literally pop into it and walk around. But one of the interesting things that I learned is like I really don't know anything about building materials. So I'm like, what the heck is my wall made out of? And so I Google, oh, it's drywall. It's
Like, is it
painted drywall.
steel?
Cotton? No, but it's like I'm like Googling textures I'm like on Polygon trying to download textures to texture the.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, what the heck is my wall made out of? What is this door made out of? What is crown molding made out of? I thought it was made out of crown molding or molding, but it's like either wood or
Wood,
drywall.
apparently.
Wood, yeah, I think I have wood. It's funny, like there's just so many things you never expect to learn when you pick up a new thing. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Checking the chat real quick. Sure, I don't
Yeah.
miss anyone here. Appreciate the comment from Davtam on your chat there.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much appreciated that we can provide good value to y'all.
I see an expressed interest on my side from a couple people saying that they would like to see some productivity or Scrum Agile videos.
Sweet.
That'd be pretty cool. Cool. I mean, I'm for some reason I'm super passionate about that. I really enjoy seeing it all come together. So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, learning the mechanics of making a game is one thing, but there's so much more to it. Especially if you're working on a longer term project, like how do you stay consistent, show up every single day, and
yeah.
push the ball forward a little bit and expand your knowledge and challenge yourself.
And juggle too. There's a lot of juggling that goes.
Right. Yeah. How do you divide up your
Yeah,
time and
wearing different hats.
yeah, I'll tell you one strategy that I've kind of came up with, especially because I'm making all these YouTube videos and have to deal with actually making some projects that I can show tutorials on and all that. But
Sure.
I think task batching is like one of the best productivity hacks I've ever came across.
Heck
Where
yeah.
I'll just like set a day and like this is my development day, and I could be working on a bunch of different projects, but just all doing development on this day, and then another day I'll record a bunch of YouTube videos, and then another day I'll edit all those videos. So it kind of eliminates that task switching.
Yeah, that's super smart. Task batching is so clutch. Also, piggybacking off of other habits to form new ones. It's sort of in the same vein. Um, yeah, it is really hard. But have you read a book called Atomic Habits? I feel like I read that.
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with it.
I think he mentions the task batching in there too. But yeah, there's all those little hacks like that. But man, it is hard. Like game development is really hard, and mad props to anyone who gets into it. And even if you don't release anything, it's a hard thing to take on, and super a lot of props. If you can even get as far as getting past a prototype, like that's impressive. Let's see here, Yazar. Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, hey, Mert, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Hey, he says 3D modeling feels super tedious for a programmer, at least for me. What's funny is like I find well, I'm a very tedious person, so I like anything that's tedious. But I use 3D modeling to unwind, oddly enough. Like
Yeah,
I don't think it's a brainless activity, certainly not.
it's artistic.
Yeah, it's artistic, and I feel like I can like if I'm programming, I can't listen to a podcast, but if I'm like modeling something, I can get away with throwing on some YouTube video,
Podcast or audiobook or
some
yeah,
long form
totally.
something or other, and just go at it. I really like doing that.
Yeah.
I actually did that last night. We're on this like productivity tip.
Yeah,
One
keep it
thing
going.
I was listening to Jerry Seinfeld do an interview, and one of the things he said was like, now, or one of the things he's been trying to do is like listen to his body. It's like the other day he said that he was working and it was in the middle of the afternoon. He felt like he needed to take a nap, so he just went and took a nap. And obviously, not we don't all have the luxury that Jerry Seinfeld does because he's millions of dollars. But the other day, my Monday is like kind of sacred because how it is. You're a YouTuber, releasing a weekly video is super hard. So like I always tell my wife that like Monday is clutch day. Like it's got to be clutch. Like I got to be on all day working on a script because the way I do my videos, like my production cycle lasts a whole week. So Monday, if I'm not done with the script by Monday
Yeah,
and
it'll
recording
throw
by
everything
Tuesday,
off. Yeah.
completely throws me. But I'll tell you what, last night I was like, and I was just not feeling it at all. I was just like, I can't do it. Like I can, but I can't. So then I was like, you know what? Let me just listen to myself here. Let me listen to my body. I'm just not gonna do it. And so I cracked open Blender and I put on a podcast and I started modeling a freaking lamp for like 2 hours. And I don't yet know the results of that because I haven't written the script yet. And Monday Clutch Day is over and I still have a video to produce. But it felt kind of nice. It felt kind of liberating to just be like, you know what? For this one week, I'm just gonna listen to my body and just have like sort of balance in my life, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's good that you found that kind of thing that's related, but it still allows you to relax and unwind a little bit. Yeah, how that guy in the chat was saying how it's super tedious. I quite like modeling it myself. I haven't done much of it lately, but I think it like 3D modeling and all that was something that kind of piqued my interest in game development to begin with. And so I actually went to college for game development, and one of the things that we did is we basically took like a low level class in like all the different disciplines across game development. So there was like programming, 3D modeling, animation, all those kinds of things. So the modeling stuff was super fun for me. I liked that a lot. Kind of more of the object modeling. I didn't really get into the character modeling or anything like that. That seems like a whole different beast that I don't know how good I'd be at it.
I stick
But
to hard surface modeling. I feel
yeah,
like hard surface.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I love. By the way, so a little sidebar. I love going on like ArtStation or even like Pinterest and searching hard surface modeling because I just love looking at good topology. I don't know if
Yeah.
you can relate. But I love like you see something and there's like it's like a
Yeah, some
cylinder, but
people
it
are.
has like a bolt in it. It's like how do they get that bolt in
Yeah,
there? And then you see the topology. It's like whoa, dude,
yeah,
quads
some people are
everywhere. How the heck?
amazing with that stuff. Yeah.
It's like it's a science and an art form.
But then, yeah, going back to kind of all the low level courses we took, I found out that I hated 3D animation. It was the worst. Like, that is what I found was super tedious. Like, you'd be working on like a 6 second clip for like weeks on end, just adjusting the little keyframes and splines and all that. I was not a fan of that.
Yeah, animation is hard. I mean, the only animation I've ever done is in like After Effects, and even that's like, gosh, it's tedious.
Yeah. No,
I can't
2D
imagine.
animation's a little better. I can deal with that, but yeah.
Yeah, 3D models and rigging. I've seen a couple people in the chat mention like doing weight painting and rigging. I have not even dealt. All I've ever done is hard surface modeling, so I can imagine that that's probably miserable.
Yeah.
Or to frame it in a more positive way, it's a skill that takes more patience.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure there are people out there that enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I get it. Some many people have called me a masochist in that how I play games and how I do things is very tedious. And I'm sure there's someone who really loves doing all that rigging and animating of 3D models. I see a pretty good question on your side here. Um, what is specifically an online game from your childhood that has sparked your interest to put you where you are today? Very specific.
That is very specific there, Wild West Drift.
It piqued my interest because I spent many hours in one particular online game. I don't know if you have an answer to that.
um, I mean, I go back to my college days. Wild West Drift. I'll give you a little behind the scenes. He was my roommate in college,
Oh, nice, nice.
and so yeah, there was like one year when we were living together. It was kind of like our first year where we were out on our own, and we basically just had our living room set up with like three TVs in it, all the Xbox 360s going, and it was just we basically like leave the house to go to class, come back, sit down, and just play Call of Duty on
Nice,
end just
nice.
forever. So yeah, Call of Duty, and then when the PS4 came out, then I dove pretty deep into Battlefield 4 for a while, and so yeah, those are probably my two answers for online games.
I dabbled in those. I'm just terrible at first person shooters.
Oh, I mean,
I,
I'm
I
not good, but they're still fun.
I'm terrible at playing them because I'm a terrible sport. Competitively, I'm like no fun. I saw coding with Unity mention RuneScape. I spent like so many hours of RuneScape, and then I went on to World of Warcraft. I played World of Warcraft for like, I mean, I got it the second week it came out in December 2004, and I can't. I think I'll put like 8 years into it, and then more recently I've played. I've just every time I get a new rig, a new computer, I'll like download it and install it just to like see how it handles and how
Yeah,
my machine
yeah.
handles it, just for nostalgia's sake. But no, I haven't. That would be the game, but I don't really online being old, bro. No time. Having a YouTube channel. There's no time to play games.
Yeah,
You play any games
exactly.
now?
Let's see. When I mean when I have time. Recently I just finished Death Stranding, which I thought was awesome.
Nice.
I was a big fan of that game. And then I just picked up on my Switch actually the original Final Fantasy VII.
Oh,
because
nice.
I've actually never played through that, so I wanted to go through that, play it, and then I wanted to check out the remake.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hear the remake's really accessible.
how about you?
Um, I just got my headset of my Oculus Quest, so I've been playing
Oh, nice.
through Half-Life Alyx. Pretty great, pretty great. I'm a one game at a time kind of guy, so like I got to play it in full. So right now I'm going through that. Before that, I was playing Red Dead, got through that. Yeah, I'm. Oh, and Witcher 3. I like big experiential games. Like I don't actually like mechanics. Like my one of my friends is like really into Monster Monster Hunter World or Monster
Yeah,
One, and I
super big
played it.
game.
Oh yeah, so I played that one, and it's like it's very much like hitting the hitbox and knowing where to go. Like I'm not a very tactile kind of when it comes to games. Like I just want to be immersed in some sort of story time or situation, and like feel like I'm that character. And I don't really want to do much. I just want to experience it. Like when you ever play Dungeons and Dragons, like I don't like fighting. I just like doing all the role playing. I hate when I get into fights in Dungeons and Dragons because I just want to like talk politics and talk my way out of situations.
Well, it sounds like Death Stranding might be a good game for you actually.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. I'm gonna have to play that after
Yeah,
I beat
if
that.
you find the idea of a hiking simulator to
Heck
be
yeah,
a
dude. Let's
fun game,
go.
that's on you. And yeah, the story is just so weird and insane. And someone asked in the chat, as a game developer, what do you think about people who skip the cutscenes? So for me, I don't skip the cutscenes. I'm a total like game connoisseur, if you will. So all the
Game snob.
yeah. So yeah, I like to, what is the designer actually going for? And I like to, you know, dive into each little game as much as I can. And yeah, watch all the cutscenes and all that. But do you have an opinion on that?
As a game developer, if I put a skip button into my game, by all means, skip it if you want.
Yeah,
You know what I
no.
mean?
And I think you should, as a designer, give people the option to skip the cutscenes because,
Yeah.
not everyone is
People
there
have
for
their own
that.
way to experience something, I think. And
Yeah,
and that's something that took me a long time to really wrap my head around. It's just some people like different things.
right.
And like my friend who plays Monster Hunter World, he's played all the Monster Hunters. He's very like he grew up playing arcade games, and so like he's very like tactile. He loves little like what's that one game? It's like Dark Souls. It's really punishing. He loves that. He loves like finding exactly where to hit the
Mm-hmm.
hitbox and like how to roll and things like that. Like so he hates games like Red Dead Redemption 2 because there's no real difficult gameplay mechanic that challenges him on that level.
Yeah.
Whereas like I like to be challenged with a really challenging story, that makes me think about, what that character's feeling and almost pretend that I'm that person so I can experience that too. But he doesn't like that. And well, more power to him. More power to him. So yeah, skip button. If it's in the game, go for it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's you talking about the crazy, intricate little games with the hitbox and everything.
Hmm.
How about fighting games? Those are
Oh,
crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's
I
definitely
suck
not
at
my
them.
cup of tea, but I know there's a huge, yeah, the fighting game community is crazy, and they're all, super into it, talking about the, frame perfect this and that, and
Yeah, yeah. I like watching it and I like hearing about it. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. No, it
oh, even
is,
like
it is
first person
amazing.
shooters. Like I suck at first person shooters, but I love watching like a Twitch streamer explain what he's doing and he
Yeah,
or she is
yeah.
doing, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. I don't want to play it, and I have no interest in learning it, but I
Like
would
it
like to. I
almost
would like
makes me want to invest 1,000 hours to get that good.
to. I was watching some videos on how to get up and running with the oh shoot, what's that game? Oh, Elite Dangerous for VR. Well, I think it's actually a PC game, but they have a VR version, but Elite Dangerous is like a space simulator, like kind of like Star
Okay.
Citizen, and it's very intricate. Like when you learn how to fly a ship in this game, like you're literally like you have the throttle, you actually have a physical joystick.
Like it's almost like a
Um,
flight simulator
it's a
almost,
flight
right?
simulator. Yeah, there's all these menus and you have to turn things on, and like you can't jump to warp speed if your landing gear's down and your weapons are engaged. So it's like I saw some pretty funny videos talking about like, oh my gosh, man, it's like you gotta go to school.
It's like a
But
job. You have to like, yeah, take a course to
you
learn
have
how
to
to
take
play
a
the
course.
game.
I don't know that if I might enjoy playing that, but I almost enjoy it just as equally, just watching someone go through it and then show me. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So I watch the cutscenes until they aren't keeping my attention anymore. I think that's fair. That's fair. You know, the way I play a game, if a cutscene isn't keeping me anymore, then that probably means the story's not keeping me, and that means the game's not keeping me.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I was saying, I like to kind of dive into the lore of games as much as I can. But I mean,
Hmm.
for a lot of games, it comes to a point where, like, you're like, okay, I'm not getting as much out of this as I, might like to have. So I'm just going to kind of stop doing that or whatever. Um, but so, yeah, I think you just kind of have to be aware of it. But I always like to give the designers the benefit of the doubt to begin with.
For sure. For sure. I mean, it's hard enough, like we've said throughout this stream, to design a game and then to actually implement it, especially these AAA games we're talking about, which is like super massive. Um, cool, man. Let's see. Wow, this turned into a really cool, a different type of discussion than I normally have. When I do these live streams,
Yeah.
I'm usually talking about code and programming, but I like talking about this high
No,
level stuff.
I think, yeah, there's so much more to game development than just making the actual game. I mean, there's, all the stuff we've been talking about, along with all the business side and marketing. And I mean, yeah, there's any millions of directions we could take this conversation.
I'm curious about your game development. So you went to college for game development.
Hmm.
What was that track called, or the degree?
So when I started, it was called Applied Computer Graphics.
Okay.
And then by the end, it actually switched names to computer animation and game development. And then I kind of went along the more game development side of things. And then I also did like a minor in computer science because programming is kind of my focus throughout. So, but it was pretty cool. Like when we did any of the game development classes, like I was pretty much the programmer on the team,
Hmm.
and then I was paired with like a designer and an artist, and we'd make some little games together.
So did you have like an affinity for programming, or you just recognized it as like a money degree to have?
That's the thing. Like I keep trying to think about like what kind of drew me to programming to begin with. I think it was just kind of growing up in school and always being pretty good at math and just kind of like understanding the very logical side of everything. So that programming kind of stuck out to me, and like the little tiny bits that I dabbled with programming in my younger years, I really enjoyed. Um, so then when it kind of came time to like pick something of like what do you want to do when you grow up, I think yeah, for some reason game programmer sounded pretty cool to me.
Sounds pretty cool even now.
I'd say so. And
Game
yeah, just kind of
programmer.
going through college and getting more experience with that, and kind of realizing that I wanted to be a little bit more out on my own, kind of doing a independent game developer kind of route, or doing kind of what I am now with my YouTube channel and all that.
Yeah, so I don't really know too many people who've gone through track in college for game development. So I think it's pretty cool, that's even offered, and I like that you get to, from what you mentioned, like you get to really experience a lot of different aspects of the
Yes.
whole
Yeah.
pipeline.
That's,
Pretty
yeah, the
cool.
best part of it, I think, for me. I think I would recommend. I mean, obviously, you don't need to go to college for game development. Like, you can definitely be self-taught. Especially now, there are even so many more resources available than when I was starting to go to college. Um, but yeah, I think it's especially useful for
You
someone who
you are
is.
one of those resources.
Yeah, that's true.
You like that?
Yeah, I know it comes full circle. But yeah, I think it's would be especially helpful for someone who is kind of like in my position where they, kind of had an idea of what they wanted to do, but didn't really want to know. And luckily, I was able to go to college at a state school,
Mm.
and so it was a whole lot cheaper, and I got a bunch of grants and scholarships and stuff like that. So the financial burden was not really all that much for me.
So yeah, it's very fortunate because we had someone ask in the last stream whether or not we thought that he should go to college for computer science. Um, and obviously there's that financial component that's like,
Right. Yeah. I don't think that should make or break your decision, but it should be a strong consideration.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm still paying off my school debt, so
Yeah.
I will be for a while. Although with this Corona stuff, they did lift that the monthly payments, so it's been kind of
Ah,
nice. Been
okay.
kind of nice.
Okay.
Or the interest. I don't know. I don't know what, but I've been yeah. It's I'm gonna be paying that for a while.
Hmm.
I'm trying to look at a. My wife and I are looking at houses right now, and I'm still thinking like, I'm about to get a mortgage on a house, and I'm still paying off my student
Yay.
loans. It's ridiculous. um, let's see here. Someone mentioned. What do you think about tutorials, Volkarov? Um, you know what's interesting? Like, I think what you were asking, correct me if I'm wrong, was what do I think about tutorials like as a player? But I've never actually implemented a tutorial in a game that I've written. And I think that'd be kind of an interesting task. See, to see what would go into that. Um, like, because obviously you can get real creative with it. Like
Mm-hmm.
classic examples, Mario has like an implicit tutorial in
Yeah.
that.
Level 1-1.
Exactly. You go
World
through
1-1
and it
rather.
teaches you by example and by your own failure.
Yeah.
But then there's like the next level tutorial where it's like World of Warcraft, for example. You got tooltips popping up all over the place.
Yeah, no, kind of, yeah, figuring out the design of a tutorial, that's a whole, topic in and of itself. And it's something that we kind of covered a little bit in school. Like, how do you
Oh yeah.
introduce different mechanics to the player? How do you not overwhelm the player? And I think, yeah, learning by doing is, probably the best way to go.
And I think to bring it kind of back to, one of the things that I mentioned earlier of like upfront planning, if you do your upfront planning and you have well-designed game mechanics, then I think that you're better equipped to make those decisions to say, hey, look, this mechanic in the context of the whole game that I've already thought through, it makes more sense to do like a tooltip or to actually
Mm-hmm.
walk them through like a tutorial level. But then you might say, hey, look, given the style of game that I've designed here, and given what the experience I'm trying to give to the player, which you would have already thought up front, I think it makes more sense to make it an experiential, implicit type tutorial. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it always goes back to that upfront planning
Yeah.
really equips you in so many ways that empowers you in so many ways that you wouldn't even think.
Right. Yeah, no, with the upfront planning, then you know what's coming and you hopefully have an idea of how important certain mechanics are going to be. So, like what are the mechanics that you really need to drive home the point to the player? Like, this is something that you need to learn. Whereas, what are the kind of lesser used features that you might just, mention in a tooltip or whatever. But that's why some people say that the tutorial level should be like one of the last levels that you make. Because you really have an
Yeah.
idea of all the mechanics in your game and all that.
Coding with Unity mentioned that there's a good GDC talk on tutorials. This is, hey, wait, I think it's literally called "This is a talk about tutorials." Press A to skip.
That's
Oh, that's
fantastic.
hilarious. For that,
That is excellent.
I'm gonna watch that later on when I'm blending another lamp. It's this joke that I have with my wife because it's like
Blending another
she's
lamp.
like, what are you doing? Like, I'm blending a lamp. She's like, what does that even mean? It's like, oh, here's a lamp, and I'm trying to recreate it in 3D as a 3D model. And like, I worked this one lamp for like a week. I was trying to get it like perfect. Like I had like a bunch of reference images
Mm-hmm.
that I downloaded of the same lamp and like trying to get the material just right. And it was a little more complicated because it had certain things like, you know, um, in the pole of the lamp where the fixture is, it had these two poles that came out of it, and sort of bent back, and that's where the bulbs were.
Right.
And like that one part, I was like, how the heck do I cut a hole in the cylinder? So yeah, while I'm blending my lamp this afternoon, I'm going to watch this video.
Dude, there are so many good GDC talks out there.
Oh my gosh. And I think they're releasing a lot because of the whole COVID-19, they're releasing a lot of
Yeah, yeah. All the speakers who were supposed to speak at GDC this year, they basically invited them to say, hey, just record your talk at home, and we'll upload it to the YouTube channel.
Very,
Because I was supposed to go to GDC this year, but
oh no.
yeah, because it's in San Francisco, so it's like 40
Huh.
minutes from my house. So I've
Dang.
I've gone a couple times, but I was really looking forward to going this year. I was kind of messaging some people and starting to plan some meetups, and then they pulled the rug out from under me.
Oh, always next year. I
Yep.
actually I had thought about going, and I was like, oh, I'll just cross that bridge when it gets here. And then obviously when this whole thing came about, I totally forgot about it. But I think I'd probably go next year.
Yeah, no, it's a great time. It's awesome.
Um, I went to Unite in LA in 2018. That
Oh,
was really
nice.
cool. It was very cool. Definitely make it out. Do that again.
Yeah, I
I
think are they doing like the Unite kind of online more this year? It seemed like it seemed like there were kind of
yeah.
smaller like Unite little events that they've been kind of posting out.
Yeah, Unite Live or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I think they're just posting a couple of videos here and there. Um, sorry, I'm in the chat now. Buckroll says from general questions, how hard would it be to make something like live tutorial where you design the game without preparation and explain your thought process along the way? Is that like that sounds like a development live stream. Yeah, but that sounds like Thomas Brush has been doing that on his on his channel. His live streams have been
Would
great.
that be kind of like dev commentary or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be like in the game as you play. That'd be kind of funny. That'd be super meta. Where, like the game kind of builds itself as you go. That'd be pretty interesting. Or maybe you give the player some sort of agency over what happens next. Like you start them off and it's like a very simple world, and then maybe it's like imagine like a side scroller, Mario, and they walk up, they see like a Goomba. Like, what would you like to do? Would you like to jump on it or would you like to shoot it? And then if you say jump, then now you have the ability to jump. And if you say shoot, then now you have the ability to shoot, but that's
But
all you
you
get.
don't have the ability to jump.
Right. And there's all these decision points. Someone is going to play through that like a million times to find like the perfect like permutation of
Yeah.
answers to like the most optimal. That'd be kind of a funny meta game.
No, and I was just looking it up. I think have you heard of the game The Beginner's Guide?
No. Is that like basically this?
It's well, it kind of reminded me of that. If I remember it correctly, it's by the
Checking it out
person who
now.
made the game The Stanley Parable,
Okay.
and
Oh,
it's pretty much, I think the idea of it is like narrated by the game designer, and he's kind of like walking you through all these
that is awesome.
interesting worlds. Yeah, it's a fun one to play in an evening. By the way, I did just get a super chat from Dav Tam who says keep it up. So really appreciate that.
Hey,
Thank you.
nice, nice.
That's awesome.
Thanks for the support. Thank you for the support.
Absolutely.
This is great. This is another iteration of this thing that we try to cultivate here, where we're trying to kind of bring everyone in the community together through these streams, and obviously through our individual channels and Discord servers.
Yeah. No,
These
and
conversations are
I
valuable.
loved what you guys were saying on the live stream you did last week with Matt about
Mm,
the whole like level 2 developers thing.
yeah,
Because I know there's so much content online for beginning game development, but what's the next level? How do you actually make a cohesive game, and kind of a lot of the stuff that we were talking about today about staying productive and motivated, and actually releasing your game.
gotta hashtag finish it.
There you
It's
go.
hard. There's a
Shout
lot
out
of
to the
skills
Game Dev
involved.
Underground.
Heck yeah, dude. Tim Bruswick, right?
Yep, yep.
Cool guy, cool guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's been back to his kind of daily, weekly videos again. So
Yeah, I followed him when I first got started, and I've been checking his channel. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I had always followed it, seen his growth. So it's pretty cool to see him
hmm
back at it. Bro, you
yeah.
got another super chat. That's awesome.
Oh, nice. Wild West Drift, only $5. Tap Tam. Yeah, let's keep this super chat chain going.
Yeah, right. Make it 15. I got
Thank you,
15.
buddy. Thank you.
Oh, pass. Alexander says, "Have you heard of Robert C. Martin and clean architecture?" Bob Martin, heck yeah,
Uncle
dude.
Bob.
Heck yeah, of course. That guy's a legend. He's a
Yep.
living legend.
Oh yeah.
And Martin Fowler too. If you're not familiar with Martin Fowler, look up his stuff. Great stuff.
I've heard the name. What does he write again?
He was a part of writing the refactoring book. Gosh, he's written so many. I think was he did he also participate in Design Patterns, Gang of Four? I think he's part of the Gang of Four. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. Don't quote me there, but yeah, he Martin Fowler and Bob Martin, Robert Martin are like my
Okay.
favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was a part of the Martin Fowler. He was part of the Gang of Four. Definitely. Um, good stuff. Yeah, there's so much content out there in the form of books, now in the form of YouTube, and I think it's great. Yeah, oh, man, Uncle Bob, Green Code. Oh, that's funny. A lot of you in my community, and maybe Jonathan's as well, might know Jason Story.
Yeah.
He's come on my streams. Yeah, we were talking the other day about this sort of level two group of content creators, and what we're getting together, and we're like, oh, you should come up with a name for it. I think he thought of the Unity Clean Coder. Oh, what was it? It was really good. The Unity Clean Coder Collective or something like that. We need to get a badge. Like,
I feel like
for
we got to
sure.
come up with some cool acronym or something.
Yeah,
Like how
right.
there's the solid principles. Like we could figure out something. I don't know.
Definitely with our own gang, Clean Coder gang. That's cool. That's cool. Well, guys, we're coming closer to the end here. Gonna do about an hour and a half. Just a reminder. I forgot to bring this up in during the stream, but smash that like button. Really does
Yes,
help.
please smash the like button, subscribe.
I'm gonna go smash your like button. Yeah, subscribe.
Likewise.
Subscribe. Again, if you hadn't heard about myself, Charles Ahmad, I do Infallible Code, do Unity tutorials, game development tutorials, programming tutorials. So check out my channel for content like that, and also Jonathan. Um,
Yep, I got the Turbo Makes
Deal.
Games YouTube channel. Lately, I've been doing a whole lot of stuff related to Unity, ECS, and Dots. I've been having a ton of fun with that. If you are new to Unity, ECS, and Dots, I would suggest have a link that you can go to, just tmg.dev/start ECS, and that'll bring you right to a little playlist that I have that can kind of get you up to speed. I start talking about what exactly is ECS and the theory behind it, and then that kind of rolls into some of the beginner tutorials, and I have my rollerball tutorial on that and stuff too.
Cool stuff. By the way, I hope this doesn't sound too like whatever. Unity just put a tweet out saying, "Hey, it's Unity Tips Tuesday. We want to hear from you. What are some of your go-to tutorials to watch? Share some of your favorites in the thread below. Hey, why don't you, if you really like our content,
Yeah,
go
hey.
go respond to that tweet with a
Get
link
the
to one of our videos."
just yeah, perfect timing. Drop some infallible code and Turbo Makes Games
Heck
videos in
yeah,
there.
dude.
Yeah.
What is Turbo, man? Where'd you get that from?
So that's kind of my nickname growing up, is Johnny Turbo.
Nice. That's
And then so
freaking
yeah,
awesome.
when I started my YouTube channel, it was originally Johnny Turbo Game Development, and I
Mm.
thought that was just a little too kind of long,
It's
and
a little
I don't know.
lot
So
to say.
yeah, so I kind
Turbo
of
makes games is
yeah
awesome.
shortened it to Turbo Makes Games.
I like that URL by the way too. Tmg.dev. It's like it's
TMG.dev.
nice, man.
Yeah, it's
And that
easy.
font
Love
too.
it.
It looks so meant to be. That's
Yeah, no,
awesome.
I do like that font. Telegramma, I think.
Hey, I see coding with unities in your chat.
Nice. What's going on, man?
Stuff. See familiar faces.
Appreciate the like.
All right. Well, we already talked about this beforehand, but I know I've got a date with some Coronas, not the virus, beer,
Hey.
to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And Yeah, you got something going on too, right? How you gonna make some? What was it again?
Yeah,
Burrito?
so we're gonna do some tacos for Taco Tuesday.
Nice.
So yeah, over the weekend I broke out the pellet grill and did a bunch of pulled pork, and just had that going like all day long. And I bought way too much pulled pork, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah, it's like there's no such thing as too much pulled
Yeah,
pork.
exactly. So we have a bunch of leftovers, so we're making some carnitas tacos tonight.
Gonna be good. All right, I linked that tweet. I linked that tweet in the chat. So go ahead and share your favorite Turbo Makes Games tutorial and your favorite Infallible Code tutorial. I think that's gonna be it for us tonight. That was a lot of fun, Jonathan. Thank you, man, for coming out,
Yeah, man, this was
chatting.
awesome.
Thank you all who joined in the chat, and even if you're a lurker and you're just watching, appreciate you for just being here. Smash that like button. And we're gonna try to do this again sometime. I'm trying to make this a weekly thing. I'm got a couple of other content creators, Unity content creators I've been in talks with. So hopefully next week we'll have another one, and then we'll have Turbo on again soon. Do it again soon,
Sweet,
man.
yeah.
That's great, dude.
Yeah, shout out to the Unity Insiders group. I'm definitely available to do more of these live streams with anyone else in there. But yeah, this was a ton of fun. I appreciate you kind of getting this together for us. I know you've kind of been doing these a lot more, so you're quite familiar with the process and helping me get my stream set up and everything. But before we
Gone
went
through a
live,
lot of pain. Gone through a lot of pain.
no, yeah, you made it go super smooth. So I'm glad
Glad to help.
about that. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't have to go through my misery to get to this point. All right, y'all. Well, thank you all again for coming out, and I'll catch you guys later. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody.